Good afternoon. Welcome to the session. My name is Mike Polark, medical device analyst at Wolfe Research. Welcome to day 2 of the Wolfe Healthcare Conference. I'm pleased to be joined in this session by InspireMD. We have CEO Marvin Schlossman and Chief Commercial Officer Shane Gleason. InspireMD is working on a highly differentiated carotid stent and a portfolio of delivery systems. Marvin is going to introduce the company, flip a series of slides, and then after that, we can jump in with some Q&A. So without further ado, I'll turn it to Marvin.
Terrific. So pleased to be here, and it's an exciting time for us as a company because it's taken a very long time to say that it's an exciting time to be in the carotid space in vascular medicine. It's been a space that has remained somewhat dormant over the last 20 years for a variety of reasons. It is still dominated by surgical intervention as standard of care for revascularizing the carotid artery area, and we're in the midst of a sea change right now that I think being catalyzed by our technology platform, which we've invested in for a number of years, which is quite unique. So what you see on the screen, and I guess a good starting point for the presentation, is you're looking at a self-expanding carotid stent. What's unique about our technology is that we have an overlay, a PET mesh overlay that sits on top of the stent, and that provides embolic protection post-procedurally, and it keeps plaque from prolapsing through those stent struts to prevent that cheese grating effect. Because of the proximity of the carotid artery to the brain, these post-procedural strokes that occur about 2/3 of the time have always limited this technology change and limited clinical outcome. And so this is a really unique feature to our stent platform, which we think has demonstrated superior clinical results, and it's a unique part of the building of our story and changing the way carotid disease is managed and strokes. So this is just a great context for the overall company and how we see our unique position. From the top left, our platform is built around this proprietary micronet mesh, which is unique to our stent platform, and it does as we just described. Our clinical outcomes are really the language of our business, and ultimately this is what drives both physicians to want to use the technology, but more importantly, protects patients long term. Once the implant is placed in the patient's body, you walk around with it for the rest of your life. So it's incredibly important that that implant be the right one. And after studying the technology in about 1,850 patients, we've demonstrated superior results with about a 1% complication rate. Now, in context to first-generation stent technologies and also surgery, that's about a 4% difference, which is a very big number when you're talking about something as debilitating as stroke. We think the market potential is significant here. Maybe this is something that we can discuss with Mike as we go along, but the way we see the market here is about 155,000 carotid interventions in the U.S. Of course, we're a global company, but there's a tremendous opportunity for us to change the marketplace. On the top right, our commercial footprint, we've sold, this is an older slide, we've sold over 45,000 systems. So this is not a new technology. It's been well sold and performed in our 30 served markets outside the U.S. The next topic here, I think, is what is most unique and what's changed this landscape significantly. A month ago, CMS approved standard risk reimbursement for carotid stenting. This is really unique because for 20 years, this was otherwise unavailable for stenting, which was a big reason why surgical intervention remains standard of care. What this means is it effectively opens up the full 155,000 carotid interventions to stenting, so that patients can have stents and physicians are paid for replacing those stents. So it really has been a huge sea change just in the last month or so in the way this market will operate and behave going forward, and we obviously stand to benefit greatly because of our investment in the space. We finalized our enrollment in our current IDE trial for U.S. approval back in June. We just reported at Viva last month 30-day results of less than 1% complications. This is the first time that anyone's reported clinical results at that level. So we feel that that is another unique milestone that adds traction to our story, both through reimbursement and also clinical data. This is consistent and in line with our real world experience, but in an IDE trial with the FDA, it just further emphasizes it's a proxy to the consistency of our success there. And our pipeline of and our roadmap includes a TCAR device, which we plan to launch to compete with Silk Road, who has otherwise run unencumbered for the last few years. They've established a great base of about 25,000 TCAR in the U.S. and trained about 2,600 physicians. We like the position that we're in as a second mover advantage here. But most importantly, we're very different in the way that we approach this market, because for us, it's all about implant and all about having the best stent, and how that's delivered to us becomes somewhat agnostic, whether it's transfemorally in a procedure called CAS or transcarotid. So this is just a quick overview. We won't spend any time on this slide except to say that CMS's final national coverage decision happened in October. It's something that, as I said, has been building for the last 20 years. A lot of anticipation. The final result by CMS, I think, could not have been better from our point of view. It enables CAS to be done without a lot of encumbrances and without a lot of conditions. So physicians can manage their patients effectively, and procedures can be done that are in the best. So in May of this year, we completed what we consider to be a transformational and pretty remarkable financing, given the current circumstances in the market. We closed a $113 million round of funding, recapitalized about 88% of the company, with 6 of what we consider to be some of the top investors in the world. Again, we think this is a proxy to the fact that we've demonstrated within a very sophisticated group of investors our ability to drive value going forward. They love the story. They love where we are relative to being able to catalyze this change in carotids. And so this financing eliminated the overhang that we've been carrying around for a while. It's built around 4 major warrant triggers, which we think are all significant milestones to value inflection of the company. They're pretty straightforward there. It's the primary and secondary endpoints being read out a year from now, approval of our CGuard Prime CAS system, our long shaft CAS system, and the approval of SwitchGuard, which is our TCAR system, and then obviously the completion of 4 quarters of commercial sales. We think these things will enable the company to be funded well into 2027, which is, again, a great position to be in where we're focused on. This is just a reiteration of what I spoke to earlier, which is carotid disease remains its last area of the vascular bed to convert to endovascular standard of care, and we think that the CMS decision will enable this. Ultimately, we see this market turning into something similar to what you see on the left-hand side there, where we think the market from a stenting perspective, both TCAR and CAS, is about 80% of the market, and surgeries become about 20%. So just a graphic of kind of how we see the market. You can see the stent, the CGuard stent here is at the center of our universe for a reason. We like to play all opportunities, all subspecialties. Ultimately, it's about placing the best stent. So whether it's by TCAR or by a CAS method, and we added this lower circle recently because we think there's a tremendous opportunity to focus on the neuro community. There's a lot of carotid stents being placed right now and no label for what we call tandem occlusions, which is stenting the carotids during an acute stroke. Dr. Siddiqui at Jacobs Institute feels that the low metal burden of our stent and the mesh protection offer the perfect platform to be able to go after an indication for stenting during tandem occlusion. So it's an opportunity for us that we see. It's about call it a $50 to $100 million market opportunity that sits outside of what we consider to be standard elective stenting. So this is just a graphic on the left-hand side. You can see what an uncovered, unmeshed, protected, open-celled stent looks like when you've got plaque prolapsing through the stent strut. You're looking down the barrel of the artery here. On the right-hand side, you can see that the mesh is doing its job. Unlike occlusive disease, which is what's being solved with other stents in the body, you're trying to reperfuse muscles in your heart and extremities. What we're really trying to do here is we're trying to prevent embolic disease with the carotids. We're trying to keep that plaque against the artery wall and keeping it from breaking off and causing strokes in the brain post-procedure. So you can see graphically here how the technology works. Again, just a reiteration of our mesh. Um, it does its job in a very unique way. We had to optimize the size of the 4 openings along with the material. After 45,000 stents sold, I think we've got this formula down pretty well, optimizing cell size and protection so that you get the right blood flow, the right protection, and it all operates together. You can see here just a graphic representation, most of these occlusions that occur on the bifurcation of the carotid artery, and you can see that our stent works remarkably well. The diameter of arteries is not uniform. We have something called a smart fit here, which allows us to oppose the artery wall optimally, no matter what part of the artery. Again, reiteration of the fact that in today's world, we operate on the left-hand side, dominated by surgery. On the right-hand side, you can see that we think the mix in the future will be stenting first, a combination of mix of surgery will be fill-in as opposed. I won't spend a lot of time. You can go to the next slide. I won't spend a lot of time here except to say this was our 30-day result that we presented at Viva. You can see for death, stroke, and MI, which is our measure of complications, we announced a 0.95%, less than 1% complication rate, which was first of its kind ever in this space, and I think demonstrates all the things that we hope to be true, but in the rigors of an FDA trial, in the context of that, we were certainly pleased with these results. This is both on an intent to treat and per protocol basis. So I think these are the kinds of things that are certainly getting the attention of the physicians in the market. Overall, this is our experience with the 1,850 patients that we've studied. You can see that we're somewhere in the 1% range as is. So our FDA data is certainly consistent with what we see in the real world as well as compared to conventional. It's just a list of all the trials and studies we have going on. It's been studied in many different environments. And there's a lot on this slide, except I'll point you to the right-hand side of this graphic, which you can see where CGuard, which is our carotid stent, is noted there. And you can see that not only in a 30-day window, but even out to 1 year and beyond, our rates of complication are best in class. What you're seeing here is a comparison between first-generation stents and second-generation stents, and then 2 competitors of ours, one of which is not on the market, the other of which is only in Europe. They have a dual-layer stent. So you can see performance criteria here that across the board, CGuard continues to demonstrate what you get in that first 30 days remaining. Our regulatory pathway is pretty clear. At this point, we set up a nice trial with a performance goal of 11.6% with FDA. As I said, our 30-day was 0.95. So we feel pretty confident that we de-risked this FDA trial. Now we're measuring ipsilateral stroke from 31 days to 365. That's the next measure here. We enrolled the trial in 23 months. It was led by Dr. Chris Metzger. I think on balance, the trial was extremely well run, and most importantly, we have about 25 of the top carotid operators that are now excited to use this in real world. Our TCAR device looks remarkably similar to what you may be familiar with Silk Road. We've made some improvements, obviously, to their device and our reverse flow setup, and we'll have the CGuard Prime system on a short staff and EDCM short staff. So we'll perform TCAR in the way that it's sort of currently defined in the market. And I look forward to this. Just quickly on the roadmap here, it's all about growth. Going forward, we've been able to capitalize the company sufficiently, and now it's about executing on our plan and building growth so that our U.S. launch is rapid, meaningful, that we absorb market share as quickly as we can, and that we continue to serve the OUS market, the 30 markets that we're in. We've got 2 new products to launch, and we're going about launching our system into a neuro community that I think has been really underserved by carotid companies. Quick map of the countries that we're currently in and where we're headed. And then some stock performance details, which I'll leave for later.
Right. Time for questions. Good. Um, so on the NCD, here's the question. I get that, it allows interventionalists to treat more patients because you're lowering the risk threshold. My perception is not that many interventionalists have historically done transfemoral CAS. Um, so they get to do more, but then are you the company to kind of train more physicians on doing transfemoral CAS? Like, who's going to pick up the torch and enable more interventionalists to do these procedures?
I think it's a great question, Mike. So proportionately, you're right. There's a fairly small number of people that are doing the high volume sites like Chris Metzger and others that we're completely aligned with at the moment. But in terms of building that capacity and capability, there's a prof-ed effort here that we've got to put into place, and we're going to focus on that. There's a number of centers we've already reached out to that will help us with training. This rising tide benefits everyone is also something we have to consider. There will be large strategics that have approved stents in the market that will also, enable their training and invest in their training. I don't think that the lift on the CAS side is going to be as significant as it was in TCAR. And I think there will be other companies that invest in the same end goal, which is to get more physicians trained to do the procedure proficiently. So I think collectively we're all going to benefit by our effort and our investment. We're not going to sit back and wait for others to do that. We're going to put in place, some mechanisms. Shane can speak to the fact that when he was at Abbott, they were doing 100 plus of these courses a year. So I think it's an area that we certainly want to allocate investment to bring those people up the curve. Once the training is complete and people get comfortable with the procedure, it's a relatively straightforward procedure, unlike TCAR. Steeper learning.
Do you have an estimate of 2,600 vascular surgeons have learned to do TCAR? How many interventionalists do CAS today? And what's the, over a 3 to 5 year horizon, what do you think is the serviceable number of folks that might be interested in getting trained?
We think the end game is close to the same, about 2,600 in today's world. I'd say there are three types of stuff. There are those that are doing product testing, always been doing it. There are those that were trained and with the very restricted coverage. There's really only so many of them. Some of those have done product, and then there'd be the third group. To Marvin's point, there's
What do you think that number is today? Who, like the bucket one, how big is bucket one in terms of physician count? Ballpark.
So that group is kind of not as broadly identified as being device certified, but we know that they're out there. That probably pushes the number to out.
Was there anything in the NCD from a facility and operator requirement perspective, the shared decision making, that surprised you, or you think is unduly burdensome?
From my perspective, it was quite the opposite. I mean, what was communicated back in July, in our opinion, was great, and that's how the final decision, came out. I think it pushes back the responsibility, as Jane said, on the societies and on the physicians to follow good practice. Not that it won't be observed and monitored, but it's not overly burdensome in terms of creating specificity for database or what shared decision making means, having to get authority to do certain things. I think they left it, in the hands of the physician and the societies to police. And the multi-specialty group that Jane referred to, we had a dinner last night in a conversation. I think they're taking that responsibility seriously as well. They don't want this to become something that doesn't fit the value that they try to create with CMS. I think everybody in that food chain feels that at least the decision was the right one and it would be managed.
I think when some people's first reaction to the coverage was, oh, people are going to run wild. There's going to be too much unchecked carotid stenting because CMS is getting out of the accreditation game. And really what they stated is, we're going to start treating carotid stenting like we treat other procedures. We expect hospitals to have credentialing requirements. We expect there to be, if this doesn't mean that outcomes can suffer, it means that they don't want to be the ones policing it. They want the hospital credentialing boards. They want the societies to provide guidance. And really, they want carotid stenting to be treated more like all of the other interventions that are performed in hospitals. It's really kind of a catch up and making it less burdensome than it has been before.
Mike, I think the only thing I would add to that is we're excited about the opportunity for people to be thinking about it as, is this a stentable lesion? As that first entree to discussion points between physicians, as opposed to, I've got to give you your alternatives, and I can't give you the full alternatives because of payment and other things. Now we believe that shift is going to go toward, what's best for you, but at the same time, what's least, invasive and those kinds of things. So I think it's a big shift in the oversight.
How about a patient flow question? Surgery has been the gold standard here for symptomatic disease and for a lot of asymptomatic patients. So my perception has been, the surgeons have a big voice in the management of this patient and receive a lot of inbounds because of the quality of that case. How does this evolve with kind of the interventionalists on level playing field, maybe enabled with a stent better than ever before? Workflow wise within the health system, there's always seemingly this tension between the surgeons and the interventionalists. Like, what's the state of play today? And as this coverage becomes, longer, why, as this coverage goes into place, like how might the patient management algorithms change?
I'll give you my take, but I'll use a quote that Jane often uses, which is all politics is local. So I think it depends on the part of the country, the referral patterns that are in place. Certainly think that the discussions about availability of a carotid stent, a one and done in a transfemoral or TCAR format, will become more commonplace. Referral patterns will change, I believe, and hopefully there'll be more compatibility amongst subspecialists. 20% of our business outside the U.S. is done transfemorally by vascular surgeons. So this whole notion that the arch is the enemy, I think is a little overdone. Ultimately, we want CGuard to be the stent of choice, and we want patient care first and procedural accuracy to be the best. And those things I think sort themselves out. But there will definitely be a change in referral pattern.
Marvin's point about the local differences. another one of the reasons that the neuro specialties have done a lot more of this recently. I mentioned stroke thrombectomy, but also when coverage has been restricted to only symptomatic high-risk patients. If you're not symptomatic, you're probably not finding yourself under the care of a neurointerventionist. So the stroke patients, patients with stroke, those often flow to the neurospecialty. So that's what's enabled them to build their carotid practice during all this. In different markets, a lot of carotid disease is picked up by general practitioners. It can be picked up by eye doctors, various eye specialties, who they have that local relationship with that will dictate where those referrals go. I think because the majority of carotid intervention, bulk of that being endarterectomy, is done by vascular surgery historically, that's where the established referrals are today. But many of those same referring physicians also refer patients to different specialties. They refer their cardiac patients to interventional cardiology all the time as well. So that's where I think it'll be, depending on who in a local market is most interested in providing care for those patients. That would be rather than just full, switch to flip and people start referring to a different specialty. They refer them to a practice or a person that they
Market growth and segmentation question with a long-term lens. How do you envision CAS growing? Is it conversion of patients that are getting CEA today to stenting because the technology is getting better? Is that the principal driver of this, or do you think surgery is at a place where it's kind of steady state and CAS growth is really market growth of treated carotid patients? And I ask in the context of, we know CREST 2 is out there and is still a very potentially potent kind of piece of data for the community, especially around treating asymptomatic disease. And what's the house view as to how share from surgery versus kind of expansion of total treated patients 5-year view?
especially with stenting, we've always, even TCAR just got standard surgical risk coverage with some exceptions. So stenting has always been done through the lens of high surgical risk patients. So is this patient appropriate for, the default is surgery. And if it's high risk for that, then I can consider stent option. Now with a level playing field, with all the procedures being covered equally across the patient population, just like Marvin showed a pie chart where it shows how every other cardiovascular intervention is predominantly endovascular. Coronary disease tends to be treated with stents, not CABG. Heart valves are done percutaneous, neurovascular, peripheral vascular, etc. So almost being equal or close to equal, patients prefer less invasive. So I think rather than looking at it through the lens of, is this high risk for surgery? If so, I'll consider my stent options. It's going to move pretty quickly to, is this a stentable lesion? And what that means is, will a stent perform there? Is there, there are things like heavy calcium and very centric plaques that might steer you away from that. But then if it's a stentable lesion, okay, what's my best access approach? How does the aortic arch look? How does groin access look? If those are bad, I should probably avoid transfemoral. But doing a TCAR could be wholly appropriate. If the patient has a radiated neck, if they have a short or heavy neck, that could be a patient that could be very difficult to do TCAR on, but could be very appropriate for a transfemoral approach. I think it just, answering your question, it seems like there's going to be a pretty quick conversion from that majority surgery, minority stenting to the reverse of that. So, rough numbers, if it's 70-30 today surgery, we think it could flip to 70-30 stenting, within a number of years. And just conversationally talking to people that do interventions, they don't see a reason why it won't be more stent-based.
I think, though, Mike,
procedures.
Just to add to that quickly, one of our strategic decisions 4 years ago was to make sure that we covered all ends of the market that were prepared to stent, anticipating that this NCD would happen, hopefully. but at the same time, there's a lot of momentum being created by TCAR procedures and others. And we just didn't want to have to choose one side of the aisle or the other. We wanted to change the narrative and make it a lot less about TCAR and a lot more about the implant, with best procedural outcome being determined by the physician and their patient, as long as it's CGuard, you know. And so I think that was just fundamentally a big difference in our strategy versus Silk Road, for example. And so how that mix and that blend of TCAR versus CAS looks 3 years from now, I mean, we've modeled it every way you can imagine, but as long as we're recipients of, that stent absorption.
The femoral delivery portfolio you have, a stent delivery system. Do you have a distal embolic protection device, or would that be, is that in your delivery system?
Player's choice.
Okay.
So some people are choosing to use an occlusion balloon like MoMA. Some people use distal filters, but we just sell a CAS system that's standalone, because we also believe that physicians like to pick and choose whatever neuroprotection they choose. There's another company out there that has a fully integrated system, but just by that nature, double filters and integrated systems, create limitations in our mind. So our system is pretty straightforward, which is you pick and choose how you want to, protect the brain, whether by TCAR, occlusion, or distal filter, and we leave it up to them.
Rolling this forward to 25, 26, you're launching kind of full bore, serving two different the both sides of the aisle. I feel like you'll have to make a lot of decisions about how to invest in a field force at that point. And my perception has been, like, current state of play, ASP on a TCAR plus stent sale would be better to you than through the interventionalist. I could be wrong there. Correct me. Like, how do you balance all this? Because one of the answers you could give is, well, we're just serving the customer and they choose. But, like, my perception is, like, a lot of interventionalists don't know how to do TCAR. And so you're selling two products, but kind of with some exception to two different constituents with different muscle memories. And so, and maybe some different economic incentives to you. Put this together for me. How do you prioritize? How do you start? What's phase one of this, and what would steady state mature platform look like?
Let me lead into that, and then we'll let Shane take it, because part of the reason why we brought Shane on board is because of his background and experience, having run the carotid business at Abbott a number of years ago, and also worked very extensively in the vascular surgery community as well. So no question, we've got a couple of constituents that by their nature have not always been friendliest in circumstances. And so the benefit of our plan is it's comprehensive. The challenge is that it's comprehensive. So, to your point, I think it's incredibly important that we understand that. Also, as you said, the economics are very different as well. Last night we sat in a room with two interventionalists and two vascular surgeons, and we had this conversation, and they were both trying to convince each other of the viability of each other's preferred technique, which we found to be kind of comical. We're going to post it online, but these are highly experienced, physicians. And I think generally what Shane said is that we believe there's going to be a different conversation that happens by way of choice. We're hoping that vascular surgeons will get more comfortable doing a CAS procedure, and if something isn't right on a CAS basis, world. But in terms of architecting this and balancing who to call on first and how to go about doing that.
I think in terms of how you get started, you fish where the fish are. And our immediate goal is not to convert someone from wearing a red jersey to a blue jersey, or red. If they're again, if you start with the outlook, with the question of, is this a stentable lesion? And then a lot of those patients, reality is, could be appropriate for CAS or TCAR. I look around the room, I bet everyone in here would do just fine with a CAS or a TCAR or an endarterectomy. So then it gets down to, okay, it's a stentable lesion, then what does shared decision-making include? It's patient preference and local operator recommendation. So if you have someone whose preferred approach is TCAR, I'd say unless that is a high-risk TCAR patient, that patient is more likely to get TCAR. If you have someone who prefers to do transfemoral carotid stenting, they're not a surgical interventionalist, unless that patient has a bad arch or bad femoral access, that patient is most likely to get a transfemoral carotid stent. So we're not going to be in the business of trying to convince one to do the other. If we only had one approach, that's what we'd be doing. But as Marvin said, it was a strategic decision a long time ago that if you look at the CMS coverage, we look at it the same way that they do, where TCAR is a form of carotid stenting. All the coverage in the NCD does not separate by access method, transfemoral, transradial, or transcervical. So we feel like we've got the most differentiated carotid stent implant in the market with the most differentiated data. So almost however that physician prefers to implant that stent, we want them to start with making the stent choice and then support them in the appropriate delivery method.
Two more, and then we can wrap. I guess I said CREST 2 before. Like, what is your base case for how CREST 2 influences the discussion longer term?
I asked that question in the fireside chat last night with a physician, and I think I won't use the word relevant because it's not a fair term for what CREST 2 intended to do, but with 2+ more years of enrollment and just the complexity of how CREST 2 is set up, the fact that NCD has happened now, I'm not sure that CREST 2 is going to redefine things in a significant way. Ultimately, the readout will be important. It's important holistically in this space, but I think given the traction and the momentum and the technology changes and all of the things that have happened since the inception of CREST 2, that many of those answers are going to be there in real world, regardless of what the readout says at that time. That seems to be the unanimous decision.
I'd say the base case is it doesn't change in terms of the market. It's when you have a trial that takes 10 years to enroll with over 100 sites, you do the math, and you're talking about the average site is enrolling a couple patients a year. So the question is how transferable are the results? And what you find when you talk to a lot of investigators who enroll patients or who stopped because they had too difficult a time to do this, it includes lesions greater than 70%, asymptomatic patients. So I think a lot of operators are going to go, okay, if it's a 70% lesion, I don't know which is right. I'll randomize that patient or encourage the patient to be randomized. Those are probably patients that they aren't. But if that same physician finds a 90+% lesion, they have a hard time convincing that patient that there's equipoise, between getting treated and trusting the medication. So that's a patient that probably just gets treated and isn't randomized. So the consideration will be when we get the results from CREST 2, really taking a look at which patients were actually included and how representative are they of all the patients that are getting treated today. And so just to kind of summarize, the feedback I hear is that the patients that are getting treated today are the ones that aren't getting randomized. The ones that might not be getting treated today or they really don't know the answer, those are the ones getting randomized. So in terms of those patients that are getting treated with endarterectomy or stenting today, those aren't really going to be represented in the trial enrollment.
Yeah, I follow. And it would seem highly unlikely to impact like coverage, and maybe on the margin, it's a new clinical discussion thread. And maybe on the margin, there's some different choices made, but as it relates to the coverage that was just put in place, sounds long shot that it meaningfully alters that for Medicare, certainly anytime soon.
You could see if there were a guideline change in terms of, hey, maybe the threshold should be 80% instead of 70%, or something like that, working in the guidelines. But in terms of coverage, it's hard to
Good. We are at time. We can leave it there. Marvin and Shane, thanks for the presentation and discussion. Good to see you.